Well, greetings once again from Cooperstown, New York, site of the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum. Bruce Markison from the Education Department, that would be me, very glad to be with you, and joined today by our Curator of History, John Odell. This is the latest in our series of virtual Curator Spotlights. We started doing these back in the spring, and we continue them into the fall just around the corner. And that is very appropriate for the exhibit we'll talk about today. It is our World Series exhibit, and it is called Autumn Glory. John has been with us for past programs, so you're familiar with him, at least some of you would be. John, it's been a little bit of time. How have you been doing? I haven't seen you in quite a while.
Yeah, Bruce, doing fine. I get a chance. I can really do most of my work now from home, staying socially distant. We've got a direct connection into the server at work, and so I can do so much research now. It's just amazing with the access to newspaper accounts. So much is online now that I can just do so much just right here at home, and then connecting straight into the Hall of Fame computer. I don't need to come in very often to the museum, which is good because, as you know, we've got a lot of people who do have to be on site and on present at the museum, and so by my not being there allows them to come in. So we alternate, the curators alternate various and sundry days coming in, and we coordinate the days when we are in and make sure that we're are not stepping on one another's toes, but it's all part of keeping the Hall of Fame safe for all of our visitors who are coming.
Now, you are at your Cooperstown residence, and I was commenting a few minutes ago that got that enormous archway behind you. It looks a little bit like the end of the plaque gallery here at the Hall of Fame. It's not.
Yeah,
but
it's not. No, it's just the grand archway between my dining room and living room. So
very good.
It looks a little bit nicer on the video screen than it does in real life. It's not quite so magnificent.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we're glad to have you with us, John. We're going to talk about the exhibit that is located on the third floor of the Hall of Fame and Museum, Autumn Glory. I was mentioning a moment ago that it's an unusual exhibit in that it's permanent, but it changes every year. Most of our exhibits don't work in such a fashion.
That's right. So this one is really quite unusual in that way. We have a couple of areas that change on a regular basis, but this is the only one that is that has a 90% permanent and 10% changing element. As you're looking at the screen here, you can see on the left-hand side, you see the entrance into the Autumn Glory area. You can see we have an area that we call the timeline, which has a history of great moments in World Series history. And then when you reach the end of that timeline, it begins with the very first World Series, and we actually have a couple of trophies from the 19th century proto World Series before the World Series actually got started between the National League and American League. And then it continues on, wends all the way to the present, and culminates in this presentation that we put together every year of this year's world champion. And so right now the defending world champion is the Washington Nationals. It does not look like they're going to have much of a chance of making it to defend their title this year.
Now, on the left side of the screen is a photograph, and you can see a blow-up of the Huntington Avenue grounds. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that was one of the sites of the first World Series.
That's right. That's right. That was the very first World Series between the Boston Americans and the Pittsburgh National League team, and the Huntington Avenue grounds is where the team is now called the Red Sox played. At that time, they were simply called the Boston Americans, and the other team was the Boston Nationals. The idea of nicknames is that we're familiar with is much more of a 20th century invention.
You know, it's interesting. The World Series has been around so long that it actually dates back to when baseball was split into two different words. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So there's the baseball grounds. That's right.
Yeah. So a lot of history that is covered in the overall exhibit. Our primary focus today is going to be the changing part, the 10% that John just referred to, and that will refer to the previous World Series that was just played. So, John, we'll begin with the introductory panel. You've got a lot of text here, 3 paragraphs. What are you trying to do in terms of setting the scene and in terms of introducing the fan to what he or she will find in this exhibit?
Right. So, every World Series is different. Everyone is unique in some way, shape, or form. And so we try to call out and remind people, because by the time this exhibit gets up and then you come to see it, it's usually been at least 6 months since the World Series has ended. And so the opportunity to refresh in your mind, this is what was happening. This is what happened with this team. This is what made this team special, and this is what made this World Series special. And calling out the unusual elements, the special elements, the record-setting elements, those things that made this distinctive for not just the team that won, but everybody, all the fans who were watching the World Series as it was going on. Because of course, it's not just Nationals and Astros fans who are watching the World Series. It's all of the baseball world. It's the highlight. It's the pinnacle of the season.
John, when you think of this World Series, and it was really a classic, 7 games, very tense, really down to the final innings. Is there one particular theme that really stands out in your mind when you think about the 2019 Fall Classic?
Yeah, there are a couple of things that stood out to me. And by the way, I have to chat just a moment about my work. It's a great job being curator of history and research here at the Baseball Hall of Fame. And so part of my research and preparation for this presentation was to go back and watch the highlights of the World Series. There's not a lot of places where you can go and watch highlights of the World Series, and it's part of your job. And so that's a pretty nice gig to have. Certainly, I think that there were a couple of elements that were unusual about this that really made this an unusual World Series. One of them was that the Washington Nationals started off so slow. They were really not doing very well. Coincidentally, we are right at 50 games into the season. And at 50 games into the season last year, the Washington Nationals were 19-31. And right now, there are only 3 teams in all of the majors that have a worse record than that right now. And that's Pittsburgh, Boston, and Texas. And they're all within just a game or so of Washington. But it shows how much baseball is designed to be a marathon, not a sprint. We have a sprint going on this year. It's a very different kind of situation. But I think it really showed the importance of depth and balance that Washington had, that they could overcome this early slow period and then just gradually build up and defeat the Brewers in a wild card and then defeat the Dodgers and Cardinals. And so I think that was the first thing that really set it up. And then the fact that it's been since 1924 that the last time Washington hosted or won a World Series. They went again in the early 30s, but it had been the franchise coming out of Montreal had never won a World Series, and it had been almost a century since Washington itself had won one, and just right at and a little bit less than that when they'd hosted a World Series. And for the Nationals, the difficulty of them having had a very good team, but never being able to get over the hump of the NLDS. So there were a lot of things that were going on from the Washington side of things. And then from the Astros side of things, the fact that they had been very good, had won a World Series, and were now coming to take it back was their motto.
John, one of the things that strikes me visually about this panel, it's somewhat of a rose-colored background that is used. It's very effective. I'm not sure what the significance of the color is, but it does seem to work. It really catches my eye.
Well, good. I'm glad. I want to thanks for calling that out, and I want to take a moment to recognize my exhibit designers and exhibits department at the hall. It's a big team effort and I'll talk about that as we go through this. But if it weren't for our exhibits department, you wouldn't be drawn into all of the things. They're the folks who mount all the artifacts. They design it. They select the photos. They arrange it into a story. They take certain photographs and as they've done here, duotone them and create a wallpaper for it, just to create the feeling of excitement and the passion that we have for baseball. And so the excitement, the joy, the color, that's a lot of what the exhibits department brings to our exhibits here at the Hall.
Yeah. So often you see a sepia tone, but this is something a little bit different, and I think it's very effective in that panel.
Yeah, probably chosen, by the way, because of the Nationals having a red as their primary color.
Part of their color scheme, sure.
Yeah.
One of the things that you were telling me is that while most of the exhibit focuses on the world champion, you don't want to ignore the team that finished second. That's
right. So, the Houston Astros were the American League pennant winners. They're the American League champions. And, just because they didn't happen to win the World Series doesn't mean that they, only one team can win in the postseason, can have their last game be a win. And that doesn't negate the fact that the other team was a good team, and in this case, a very, very good team. And, had the last game of the World Series, a few things changed, then it would have been an entirely different exhibit. So we have a few items here from the Astros. We've got Jose Altuve's helmet, and he wore it throughout the postseason, and he led the Astros in hits, homers, RBIs in the division series, and hit his winning homer off of Aroldis Chapman to win the championship series MVP award. And he had the most hits of anybody on the club throughout the postseason. So he had just a terrific offensive postseason. And then we also reached out to Michael Brantley, who made an incredible Game 6 play wearing that glove. And some of you may remember this. Aaron Judge, Yankees Aaron Judge, was at first base, and Aaron Hicks hit a blooper, and Brantley dove in and caught it and fired to first to double up Judge. Yep. And it was a real rallying point. The Yankees were about ready to turn that series around, and that ended it. That quashed it, and it was just a terrific play, wonderful defensive play, and it was what put the Astros into the World Series. So it was an opportunity to reach out both for an obvious offensive hero in the path of Altuve, part of Altuve, but also to recognize the defense a little bit and give Brantley a little bit of love too.
You've been with the Hall of Fame since the late 90s. Has it always been our tradition to try to get something from the runner-up team, or is that a new philosophy? It's a newer philosophy. When I first got here, and for the first few years, we did not have a very big section devoted to the World Series. That actually was quite small. It was the size you could get a jersey and maybe a bat into it. So that was in the early 2000s. Since then, I'd say over the past 10 to 15 years, we have been working very hard to get a better representation. I will say that when you have a 7-game series like this one, there's a greater opportunity to do that kind of thing. Yeah.
When it's a 4-game sweep, pardon me. When it's a 4-game sweep, there's often not an opportunity to do that kind of.
Yeah. Interesting. All right, let's talk about one of my favorite moments. Certainly a favorite moment if you're a fan of the Washington Nationals. That game-changing, series-changing home run by Howie Kendrick. I believe it was the 7th inning, and we do have the bat from Game 7. It's the one that we see on the left side of the screen. But tell us more about this one.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to let you know that you give a little correction. This is actually from the NLDS. This is Kendrick's NLDS bat. We've got his ball coming from Game 7 coming up shortly. But I need to correct you on that. So this was from when Kendrick wielded the bat in the 10th inning grand slam in Game 5 to defeat Los Angeles and give the franchise its first ever World League Championship berth. I mentioned a moment ago that they had come several different times, and I don't remember how many times. There's probably a Washington Nationals fan out there who can remind me of the Game 5 losses that the Nationals had over and over again in the league championship in the division series. And this was finally this light colored bat on the left is finally when they got a chance to break through that particular roadblock. And so this was his grand slam and the first time that the Washington Nationals made it out of that first round of the playoffs.
Interesting bat. It's the two-tone, the light color at the top, dark at the bottom. You don't see that bat used all that commonly in the major leagues. We are going to talk more about Kendrick as we go along, but to me, he's one of the real fascinating guys. You know, he's been a good player for a long time, a journeyman in recent years. He's not the first guy you would think of to be the one who would emerge as a division series or postseason World Series hero. And to see a longtime veteran who's almost never been in the spotlight have that chance here, that's kind of refreshing to see that. It was
one of those neat things. And I remember it, seeing this and being cheered by the fact that, you know, here's a guy who often has during his career has just been a role player. But in this particular postseason, his role was as a major spark plug and one of the real leaders of the team. And to have that happen in the World Series is just breathtaking. I remember getting a chance to talk one time with Brooks Robinson, and he was talking about his 1970 World Series. He said, I never had 5 games like that in my life. He said, and it's like, well, when you have the chance to stand on that pedestal and you don't fall off of it, that's a pretty good thing.
Yeah. Here we have a couple of things to talk about. We'll start with a more standard piece of baseball equipment, and that is a ball. This is the home run ball from the bat of Juan Soto. Give us the context on this one.
Yeah, so this was Juan Soto was the youngest. He was the 3rd youngest cleanup hitter ever to appear in a World Series, and he joined Mickey Mantle, Miguel Cabrera, and Andrew Jones as the only players to hit World Series home runs before their 21st birthday. And in Game 1, you may remember seeing this. The Houston jumped out on top to start off, and but Soto hit this home run ball way up onto the train tracks. And if you watch that game, they showed that ball just sitting up there where the Houston tracks go back and forth. Remember, this was one of the more unusual circumstances of this, or unique circumstances of this series, was that the road team won all the games. Now, we've had times when the home team has won all the games, but this was the first time that the road team had ever won all the games. So this was being played in Houston, and Soto hit this home run ball. It actually tied the game at that moment, and the Nationals went on to win Game 1.
You mentioned it was up on the tracks. Do we know who retrieved the ball?
It was, we do. I don't know the name but it was one of the Astros workers who retrieved the ball.
And gave it to
somebody who was authorized to go up there and retrieve it.
Yeah. gave it to Soto, and then Soto gives it to the Hall of Fame.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's how we got it. And I want to thank you for mentioning that. It gives me the chance to say all these artifacts were donated to the Hall of Fame. That's the way that we obtain artifacts. Everything is donated. We don't purchase these items. That was a decision made a long, long time ago. And it was made back when the items were really not considered to be very valuable. Now they are. Yeah. And for players and teams to forego the income that they could get by selling these and instead donating them to the Hall of Fame so that everybody can enjoy the heritage of baseball is just a terrific gift. And when players like Soto and all the other items that you'll see here, Kendrick, when they donate these things to the Hall of Fame, it's just it's a boon that we can't really appropriately thank them for. We give them exactly what we give anybody else who donates to the Hall of Fame. We give them a certificate suitable for framing. They get a lifetime pass to the Hall of Fame, and they get our undying thanks. Yeah. And that's about it.
You think about this. Soto is a young player. His first World Series home run.
That's right.
His ball probably means a lot to him, and it says volumes that he's willing to give it up. And, give it to a place where it'll be displayed and seen by many more fans, although it won't be in his personal possession. Now, the other item that we see here normally would have nothing to do with baseball. I have to be honest, I know very little about this whole Baby Shark thing. I'm more familiar with the awful Sharknado films, 5 of them, which aired and have mercifully come to an end. Tell us about the Baby Shark and the connection throughout the season to the Washington franchise.
Yeah, so one of the outfielders for the Washington Nationals, Gerardo Parra, was in a midseason slump. And his little daughter, I think she was like 2 or 3, her favorite song was Baby Shark, this little earworm ditty that once I sing it, and I'm not going to because nobody wants to hear that and keep that in their head all day long. You can't get it out. And so he chose that as his walk-up music. And lo and behold, because it's baseball, he starts hitting again because he's now walking up to his daughter's favorite song. And so it turns out that that this song already has a whole series of hand motions that go with it. And so you get little sharks, and then and then finally you get grandpa sharks. And so the Nationals adopted that. And so when you got a single, you got a little one, you would see them do this kind of thing. And then if you got a double, you did this. And when great big things happen, you used both arms. So this was the fans loved it. They were singing it in the stands. This particular shark was in Parra's locker during the World Series. And so our Vice President of Communications, John Shestakovsky, whose job it is to keep track of all of the things that are happening during the World Series and figure out what it is that we want to acquire for our exhibit. We made sure that this was on his list because one of the things that we do like to do is tie the story of the fan and the player and the series all together. And for the Nationals, this was that thing.
I wonder if that little shark that we see there, that little blue, I guess it's a doll of some kind.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I wonder if that originally belonged to Soto's daughter. Do we know that?
I don't know that. I don't know that. I think that it was just one that was in his locker, but I know it was in his locker. I don't know that it belonged to him. I hope we didn't take it from his daughter. That would be just a terrible thing.
It kind of looks like one of the Beanie Babies, which
it does. Yeah, it's kind of squishy, more squishy than Beanie.
Yes. All right. Here's another interesting character. We've talked about some of these journeymen, the Howie Kendrick, the Gerardo Parras. Here's another guy, Fernando Rodney for the Washington Nationals. He's not the first guy you think of when the 2019 championship comes to mind.
Right.
But then you look a little deeper, the ancient National. Tell us about him.
Yeah, so Fernando Rodney, and you may remember seeing him. He was with Toronto. He he's most notorious for wearing his cap askew. And he was one of the viejos, one of the Nationals viejos, the old ones was what they called them. He embraced this nickname. He actually was picked up from Oakland, and he was 42 years old. And when he came in to relieve, he became the oldest World Series reliever since Joe Niekro in 1987. So Rodney came in. He's no longer a closer. More of a middle, spot reliever, but the opportunity to acknowledge again one of the lifetime guys of baseball, and to acknowledge sometimes it's hard to stay in baseball. It really is. Every year there's somebody younger and most often cheaper who is coming to take your spot away, and so to be able to stay in the game for 20 years is just a remarkable kind of thing. So we wanted to at the Hall of Fame, we got a bunch of old guys. We want to honor an old guy when we get a chance.
Yeah. So he's a little bit younger than Joe Niekro. Joe was what, 43, I guess?
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Boy, Joe Niekro, there's a name that warms my heart. I think of the fantasy camp that he attended here in the early 2000s. He and Phil, his brother, Hall of Fame right-hander, both partook in that fantasy camp, and then they did a program in the Grandstand Theater later that night. And it was so heartwarming to hear these two guys talk about how much they loved each other and admired each other. And then you think back, and I think it was only maybe a month, maybe 2 months later, that Joe passed away suddenly from an aneurysm. He was still a young guy, appeared to be in very good physical condition, and just like that was gone. But I always think back to him and Phil and that great relationship. So I'm kind of glad to hear his name all these years later. So a great story of Rodney, who had been a one-time closer. It had some 40 and 50 save seasons here at the end of his career, and he gets a little bit of World Series notoriety. Very cool. Here we have, another guy, not a star, a good serviceable player, not toward the end of his career, probably more toward the middle of his career, but Nationals catcher Kurt Suzuki.
Yeah.
A lot of things happen with him. He hits a big home run. Then he has an injury that puts him out of commission. And he's also a guy with an interesting connection to the College World Series. So there's a lot to talk about here. Put Suzuki's story in this context, if you would, John.
Yeah, so Suzuki is one of the few players to win both the College World Series, which he did with Cal State Fullerton, and the World Series. During 2019, he was Max Scherzer's preferred catcher. So there's this dynamic that sometimes grows when somebody might not be the regular catcher, but they have a particularly good connection with one of the pitchers, and so that pitcher says, okay, whenever I'm pitching, I want to make sure you're catching, and sometimes that works out, sometimes it doesn't. Obviously for the Nationals this year, it did. He ended up having just a very good hitting season. And when he was wearing these spikes, he smashed a solo Game 2 home run that had been tied 2-2 in the seventh inning with nobody out. And he made it 3-2, but the final score ended up being 12-3. So it just really broke open this Game 2, in turning it from a nail biter into a rout. And sadly for him, he then, as you just mentioned, ended up suffering an injury during the series and was not able to participate any longer. This was about his last big moment in the series. But it just takes one, and if it's the right one, then you can help propel your team on to victory.
And here we have his pants from that game and his rather unusual spikes.
Yeah. So the cloth here on the right is Martinez's pullover. We'll talk about that momentarily. But the spikes are Suzuki's, yes, and with a kind of a strange strap wrap. It's a Velcro strap that goes around, and I'm guessing as a catcher he just needed to have a little bit more support down around his ankles. But these are the shoes that he was wearing that game when he hit that home run.
And we will get to the Martinez garment a little bit later on in the program. Here's a guy no longer with the Washington Nationals. He became a free agent. He signed a mega deal with the Los Angeles Angels franchise, now starting third baseman for them. And this is coupled with the Kendrick bat. But on the right side is the black bat, which is suspended a little bit higher, and that belongs to Anthony Rendon. Tell us the story behind this one.
So Rendon used this bat early in the series, and there's a neat story about this. After Game 2, he was coming back to Washington, and he approached our communications VP, John Shestakovsky, I mentioned him earlier, and said, "I want to give you this bat." He said, I used it earlier in the series, and I just have good feelings about how things are going to be going, but I want to give this to you now. Well, he ended up with the team high 3 doubles and 8 RBIs, and had clutch homers in games 6 and 7. And so this was his foreshadowing almost of, like, he ended up getting rid of the bat that was holding him back so that he could get the bats that he needed to get. It's a great story, and when John accepted the bat, it's like when a player is giving you a game used bat, and I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. You go, "Thank you very much, we appreciate it." One of the questions that often comes up is, how do you know that these are the right ones? How do you know that that's the right bat? And we have an old trust but verify statement that we have here at the Hall of Fame. Those of you who are old enough to remember that we understand that the player thinks that this is what it is. But we have to go back and double check. Now, one of the things that happens now that didn't used to happen is that MLB does have its holograms, and they put the stickers on, and you can see what it's supposed to be, the authentication stickers. But we don't trust that either. So we go back and we watch the game, and we look to see the distinctive elements. And on this one, that you can see where the ball marks might be. The same was true of the Howie Kendrick bat. You can see the light colored bat on the left hand side. You can see right where he hit that home run. It's just like that mark is right there. And so we look for the minuscule, and because we've got digital TV now, the minuscule differences between different kinds of bats, and make sure that we know which game and we can even go to the at bat and figure out which at bat they use the equipment for. So we do that with the jerseys, with the caps, with the bats. We do it really with everything to make sure that when you come to the Hall of Fame, you're seeing what you think you saw.
Interesting, and it's not necessarily the players trying to pull a fast one. Sometimes they get them mixed up.
Sometimes they just get them mixed up. We had a situation that I uncovered a few years ago. Big Papi gave to our previous president, Jeff Idelson, after the World Series that Boston had won. I don't remember which one now. He said, "Here you go, Jeff. Here's the bat that I used." And Jeff said, "Thanks very much." It didn't come out of, it didn't come through authentication. It came straight out of Big Papi's locker. And he brought the bat back from the bat rack at the field, and Jeff gave it to me and said, "Here's the bat that he used." And I went back through all the games of the World Series, and because it had a particular lizard skin wrapping at the handle, it was very distinctive, and you could tell exactly which bat it was. And he didn't use it in the World Series. He had used it extensively in the American League Championship Series, but he hadn't happened to pull it out in the World Series. And so we talked about it as part of his as a postseason bat, and he had both a great World Series and a great ALCS. But the very rarely is somebody trying to pull something over on us.
Yeah.
It's just that they have a lot of equipment, and in the same way that I don't know which pen I might have used to write a memo, they're not necessarily sure which bat they might have used to hit the home run. Some of them. Others know exactly which ones I used.
Yeah, Ted Williams could detect the slightest difference, one bat to another. He had very rare quality. One of the things that's always fascinated me about World Series play, and I guess it has to do with, when I grew up with the game, late 60s, early 70s. And I think of these great pitching tandems that led teams to championships. Lolich and McClain in 68 for the Tigers, Seaver and Kuzman for the Mets in 69, Hunter and Blue for the A's in the early 70s. Now, those were all righty-lefty combinations. Here we have two right-handers.
Yeah.
The two pretty equally dominant pitchers, Strasbourg, Scherzer. Without these two, the Nationals championship would have been a pipe dream.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question about it. And so we have Strasburg's jersey and Scherzer's cap. And there is no more fitting combination to be able to have together. They pitched games 1 and 2, and then they originally was going to be Scherzer pitching game 5, but he had back spasms. He couldn't come out. They had to do a spot start, and then so he ended up coming out and gutting it through game 7. So they ended up winning games 1, 2, 6, and 7, which were the only, which were the 4 games they had to win.
Yeah. A great jersey. I mean, it looks beautiful. Looks in excellent condition. Of course, it was only used last year.
Yeah.
And I can just see that cap perched on Scherzer's rather unique looking face.
So in game 1, Scherzer outdueled Garrett Cole 5-4. Tremendous game. Very close game. Strasbourg game 2 was close all the way to the 7th inning. And then they came back. Strasbourg, when the Nationals came back to Washington, of course, came back to Houston, the Nationals were down 3-2, and he pitched 8 1/3 innings and ended up winning that 7-2. And then Strasbourg did that, and then Scherzer came back and in game 7 faced Zach Greinke, and it was the first time that 2 former Cy Young Award winners had faced off in a game 7 in World Series history. So once again, you never know what history is going to be made in any one particular baseball game. So, but that was one of the neat things, and then the Nationals ended up winning that game, but it was due to these 2 pitchers who just really worked and made kept the team in the game and successfully.
Yeah, one thing that inevitably comes to mind, we think of these great pitchers, and you think about a guy like Scherzer, and people have already started talking about him as a candidate for the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Is that a factor at all? In I know that it's not you yourself that puts in the request for an artifact. That's done by our public relations department. But is that a factor at all in deciding whether something should go into an exhibit? Not only how the player performed in that World Series, but in a broader sense, not that you're predicting he's going to be in the Hall of Fame, but knowing that that's a possibility. Does that play a factor at all in creating an exhibit?
I think in a way, perhaps it does. We know that one of the hallmarks of Hall of Famers is coming through in the clutch, and coming through when the stakes are high, and when players do that, that's an indication that they are going to do something special. And our primary job is to tell the story of this particular World Series. Otherwise, more often during the course of the year, Bruce, we're constantly in meetings figuring out what do we need? What do we want to tell the story of this year? What's the story? What's the narrative arc of baseball in 2020? And what we've learned is that if we can get the year right, if we can tell the story of this year, then very often we will end up collecting the artifacts for future Hall of Famers. And now it will be true that when a great player is winding down his career, we will look and see, hey, where are our gaps in this, in our collecting for this player? Albert Pujols, for instance, it's like, clearly he's let's call him a very likely candidate to the Hall of Fame. And it's like, is there anything that we don't have from him that we would like to? And so then that's when our communications people work with the team communications people, work with the player and say, hey, what can we do to complete the story of your part of baseball history? So I will say that's the kind of way that we would approach it. In the World Series, it's much more about who did what in it, and rather than collecting an item from a Hall of Famer who might not have really factored very well in the series.
Yeah, here obviously you have both of those situations. It comes together rather perfectly. All right, here's the situation I was referencing earlier. The home run ball from Game 7, Howie Kendrick. Really the turning point in that particular game, and as it turned out in the series, because it was Game 7. Tell us about getting this ball.
Yeah, so this was terrific. So the thing, remember in Game 7, Zach Greinke had pitched 6 innings, 6+ innings, had really kept the Washington team, the Nationals, off balance. He was, it was just a masterful pitching feat that he was doing, and just a great duel between him and Scherzer. And Greinke had won Game 3, and now he had been pulled because the Astros decided they wanted to get some more offense going, and Will Harris had now come into the game. I think they just pulled Zach because he had given up a walk or a strong a hit. I think
he had tired. They felt he was tiring at that.
He was tiring. Yeah, it was not even an offensive switch. So correct myself.
In the middle of the inning. That's right. Yeah.
And so anyway, Will Harris came in was now in the 7th inning, and the Nats were behind 3-1, or 2-1, and he hit this. Kendrick came in and hit this ball, and if you'll remember, it was he's a right-handed hitter. He hit it off the right field foul pole, and it clanged off of it. And actually, there's a bit of yellow paint on that ball, which is just a terrific testimonial, I think, to how hard he got it. That it got a little bit of paint on it, and then again, donated by Howie to the Hall of Fame. This is just a remarkable gift to us, because that's they got that 3-2 lead. They did not relinquish the lead. They eventually emerged victorious 6-2. But this was the ball that turned the series around in the 7th inning for them. As a matter of fact, I was just doing some stats and saw that the Astros scored first. Let me get this right. That I had written that down, and now I must have put it down. Oh, there we go. Yes, the Astros scored first in 5 of the 7 games, and yet the Nationals ended up winning 4. So that was they were definitely a comeback team.
Yeah, so much for the rule that the team that scores first wins the majority of the time.
Yeah, don't listen to Tim McCarver.
Yeah, not the case in this series. I love the couple of things about the paint. First of all, I mean, we don't have many baseballs in the collection that have, splotches of paint on them. But it does tell that story that, it hits that foul pole or that foul screen.
Yeah.
A few inches to the right is just a loud foul.
Yep.
To me, there's just so much that's told by that little bit of paint there. That's great. Let's talk a little bit about the managers. We haven't really talked about the managers. Davey Martinez, relatively young, inexperienced manager, had interviewed a number of times before, finally gets the job with the Washington Nationals. Team got off to the terrible start in 19, as you mentioned, and then they come back. There may have even been some conversation about Martinez, perhaps his job being in jeopardy. And, of course, he ends up being the World Championship manager. But he donates the hoodie that we see on the right. Tell us about what that hoodie says and what kind of a story it tells to you.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, remind our viewers also that in the middle of the season, Dave Martinez had to step away from the game because he had a heart condition. And he underwent treatment for that. And so then came back to lead the team. But he motivated the team during the season with stay in the fight. They were the whole idea when they were down and had so many losses was just like, all right, all we're going to do, we're just going to scrap. We're going to fight for every inning. We're going to fight for every out. We're going to fight for every run. Stay in the fight. He felt like the team had the talent to climb back into the race. And in fact, he was right. And so that was their catchphrase, stay in the fight. And then when they got into the World Series, the Nationals updated their slogan to finish the fight. And that's what that says, finish the fight. And Martinez wore that hoodie during Game 7 and then donated it to us. So we were really thrilled to be able to have that as another neat part of that story is the personal effort and toll that Dave Martinez and some of you may remember also there were quite a few arguments in Game 6 in particular where there were some difficult umpiring calls that were made, and Dave Martinez came out and he was in fine fire. He was doing his best Bobby Cox and Earl Weaver imitation. He was as angry as he could be, and there was some concern that he might have some physical trouble, but he was clearly was doing okay by that time. But he was definitely the right man for the job for the Red Sox that year.
John, one other interesting note about this artifact, we don't have a lot of hoodies in the collection.
No, we don't.
If only because this is a relatively recent baseball fashion item. I mean, you go back to the early days, the Christy Mathewson era, players wore sweaters.
Right.
When I was growing up, it was the windbreaker jackets, the satin jackets. They became very popular. Now the hoodie is the thing, and we don't have a lot of those.
Right. So it's and that's something that we also are looking at, Bruce. Anytime that there's something, a new tool that's being used, a new piece of equipment that's being used, a change in equipment that's being used, we like to acquire one of those, but we want to acquire it when it's meaningful, not just because it's the first time that it ever came out. I'll go back and you can see on the left-hand side, far left, you can see the Altuve helmet with the C brace that's on there that protects the face. Those have been used occasionally by players for a long, long time. We've seen these sort of half helmets and even football face masks added to the helmets at different times. If you remember way back in the 1960s and early 70s, but when Mike Stanton got hit in the face, Giancarlo Stanton got hit in the face with the Florida Marlins, he became one of the first modern sluggers just to say, you know something, these guys are throwing so fast and so hard, talking about the pitchers, my face is worth something and my career is worth something. And more players started wearing that C strap on their helmet, and we didn't get it for the first person that we saw that had one, but we waited and we said, okay, well, this is not I'm not saying that the Jose Altuve is the first, but we waited until there was a meaningful opportunity to grab one of these new innovations into the game. So that was an equipment innovation. The jersey, the hoodie is more just a stylistic innovation, but always looking to expand the collection of what we are collecting and what they're using in baseball.
Along those lines, it wouldn't surprise me if this year's World Series, maybe there's a face covering, a face mask.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I'm sure that there will be. We have acquired already a couple of different face masks from the regular season and from fans, and so we're looking forward to seeing what's going to be new and different for the World Series.
We do have a few minutes remaining with John Odell. He is a curator of history here at the Hall of Fame. We are talking about our Autumn Glory exhibit. If you want to pose a question to John, you can jump into the Zoom group chat. A couple of people have already entered some questions. One is coming in from Scott Blake. He wants to know, when a situation comes up like the Ortiz bat that was mentioned, do you contact the player to let him know the correct information as to the item's provenance?
Yes, absolutely. We want, when we send out the paperwork for it, that will confirm the transfer of the ownership from the player to us. So he's donated it to us. He said, I want you to have it, but we then have to have the paperwork that goes back and forth. Pardon me, that's where we say, this is exactly what it was. And so we'll go back and say, used in Game 6 of the ALCS on this date. And so that way it's very clear to the player and to us what this item is. So that way we want to make sure there's no misunderstanding and no lingering misunderstanding about what it is.
Yeah. John, as we start to look ahead toward this year's Fall Classic, earlier this week, the postseason schedule announced by Major League Baseball. And if everything goes according to Hoyle, the season would end, the World Series would end Game 7 on October the 28th. It could certainly end earlier than that, and depending on weather and other situations, it could end later. So the target is October 28th. I know that this exhibit sometimes debuts at different times. Sometimes it's opened up in December, sometimes it's opened up in the new year. But if the season does end in late October, that does set a situation in place where I guess possibly the exhibit could be up by December. Is that possible?
Yeah, because we have, under ordinary circumstances, I would say yes. But because we're operating with staff that are in on different days, and we're not firing on all 4, 6, or 8 cylinders, or however big your car is, it's really much more difficult now, Bruce, to figure out what the timetable is and how the timing works. Our collections department, when the artifacts come in, that's part of our team. They have to document all the items, photograph them all, do all of the electronic records. So that all has to be done first, and that takes time. The curatorial, our department does the research, the reconfirmation, the writing for all of these items. The exhibits has to mount them, create the photos. So there's a lot that goes in. Usually, it just takes, and then sometimes it takes time for all the artifacts to come in, because the teams will send them in a little bit later on. So, we always try to get them up as quickly as we can. But it's really difficult to figure out, especially in an unusual year, how long it's going to take before we can get it in.
Yeah. One thing that we have tried to do in the past is when the World Series ends, we do acquire a series of artifacts, and usually somebody from our public relations department will do kind of an impromptu artifact spotlight
Yep.
in one of our theaters. Currently, our theaters are closed, so we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but that's another thing that would occur. If it does occur, would occur certainly before the new exhibit is reopened. Now, this all has to do with the 10% part of the exhibit that changes year to year, but something that's always there is the rest of the exhibit, which looks back at the history of the World Series. There's a case that displays the various rings, the pendants, watch fobs that used to be given out to world champions. So for anybody visiting, immediately after the World Series or during the World Series, there is still an exhibit to see. It just won't be completely updated at that point.
That's exactly right. And we'll leave this particular exhibit up until we're ready to make the change. So the Washington story will stay up until whoever, the new artifacts have come in, they've been registered, they've been cataloged, they've been photographed, and they've been, we've got the mounts made for all of them. And then over the course of just a few days, we'll take this entire exhibit out, totally refurbish the exhibit case, and install the new one, the new exhibit. So there's a very, very short window in which there's not something up there. And if it's, and as a matter of fact, if you're a fan of the team that wins, contact the Hall of Fame, and we'll let you know when the exhibit is up, or we'll tell you to call back until the exhibit is up, because we don't want you to be disappointed and arrive a week too early and see the team that you didn't want to see instead of the team that you did. But we work our very best to turn that around. And yeah, we do. We have the ring cases there, which features, going back to the watch fobs and lapel pins, wrist watches. There was even one year of the Philadelphia Athletics when they won their second World Series in a row back in the 1930-31 time. They got a tie clasp with made out of an elephant and a diamond with the trunk holding a diamond. Nowadays, of course, it's a ring. It's always a ring, and that's the new tradition.
Yeah,
I say new tradition since 1922. That's the new tradition.
Yeah, that's right. It hasn't always been the ring, and even when they did start to go to the rings, intermittent years, there were still other things mixed in. I think it may have been the 1930s when it finally became the ring consistently year after year after year.
Yeah, there was about 10 years when it was going back and forth, and now it's just rings.
Yeah. Well, John, great information about our Autumn Glory exhibit. We're certainly looking forward to the World Series, also to the new exhibit when it does go up. We always appreciate your time with us. Great information behind the scenes. Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Bruce. Thanks for inviting me, and I look forward to coming back again. Let's do it again.
Absolutely. Reminder about upcoming programs coming up next Tuesday, and the date escapes me, but it's the next Tuesday that's coming up on the calendar. No idea what today is for some reason, but next Tuesday we will have our next in our series of Ask the Expert programs with Sue McKay, our Director of Collections. So that's coming up next Tuesday, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And then a week from today, next Thursday, we will feature a virtual field trip about 50 years of collecting baseball cards. That's about how long I've been collecting, gives you an idea of how old I am. And I'll look at some of my favorite baseball cards of the last 5 decades. So that's a week from today. Next Thursday, again, that'll be 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So 2 more virtual programs coming to you next week as September very quickly starts to give way to October. We thank John O'Dell. We thank everybody else for joining us for our virtual Curator Spotlight. We hope you've enjoyed the program. Have a great day, everybody.